The next morning, the sun came up over the city, but everything felt completely different. This place wasn't my home anymore. It was a battlefield. The only difference was, I now held the high ground. While the Millers stepped off their champagne hangovers inside my brownstone, completely convinced they were the kings of the castle, the real world was about to knock on their door. It all started at 9 a.m. I sat in my hotel room, sipping coffee, listening closely to the live audio feed. The house was dead silent until the front doorbell rang. Greg stumbled downstairs in his boxes to open it. It was a courier. Near delivery for the tenant in Unit 4B. Oh, wait. The forwarding address says it's right here, the courier mumbled, handing Greg a thick envelope. Greg tore it open. It was from the property management company I hired. An eviction notice addressed to Tiffany. "What is that?" Tiffany shrieked, wrapping herself in my bedsheets as she rushed down the stairs. "Greg, they're kicking me out. They're giving me 3 days to either pay 12 months of back rent or leave." 3 days? Greg stared at the paper. "That's impossible. Legally, they have to give 30 days' notice."
"Read the fine print," Tiffany yelled. "It says because the lease is a forgery, squatter rights don't apply. Greg, they know. They know the lease is fake."
"Calm down," Greg said, his hands shaking. "I'll handle it. I'll just transfer some money from our joint account to pay this off and keep them quiet until the power of attorney goes through." He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. Even through the screen, I could practically feel the color draining from his face in real time. "Access denied," he whispered. "What?" "It says the account is frozen. Suspicious activity." "Try the credit cards," Loretta shouted from the living room. Greg frantically grabbed his wallet. He dialed the number on the back of his Platinum American Express card, the one attached to my account. I listened to his side of the call. "Yes, this is Greg Miller. My card was declined." "What do you mean it was reported lost? My wife is in Japan." "No, I can't put her on the phone. A fraud investigation. But I need to buy groceries." He slammed the phone down. "She locked the cards, every single one of them." "How is that possible?" Hank asked, walking in, looking completely disheveled. "She's in Tokyo. She must have set up fraud alerts before she left," Greg said, panic taking over his voice. "We have absolutely no access. The joint checking, the savings, the credit cards, everything is locked down." "So we have no money?" Tiffany asked, her voice turning ice cold. "Greg, I need my prenatal vitamins. I need food. I need to pay for my storage unit." I have $50 in my wallet," Greg said weakly. $50? Tiffany laughed, and it was a sharp, cruel sound. "You promised me millions, Greg. You said we were rich." "We are rich," Greg shouted, waving the forged power of attorney documents. "As soon as I file this with the county clerk, we own this entire building. We just have to survive a few days until she gets back, or until the paperwork processes." "I'm not eating ramen for a week," Tiffany screamed. "You said you were a man. Fix this."
The tension in the house was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Under the sudden pressure of having nothing, the illusion of their happy little family was fracturing. It's amazing how fast love evaporates when the credit cards get declined.
That afternoon, things got significantly worse. Following the strict instructions I passed through Mr. Reynolds, the property management company sent a maintenance crew to check the brownstone for an emergency gas leak. I watched the cameras as 2 heavily built men in work uniforms pounded on the front door. "We need to check the basement," one of them said. "Someone reported a gas leak." "There is no leak," Hank shouted, blocking the doorway. "Get lost." Sir, if you don't let us in, we are legally required to shut off the gas to the entire building. City regulations." Hank reluctantly stepped aside. The 2 men, who were actually private security personnel, hired by Reynolds, walked through the house. They didn't care about a gas leak. They were auditing the occupants. They confirmed who was sleeping where and quietly took photos of the damage. Wine stains on the carpets, shattered vases, and trash left everywhere. As they headed for the exit, they handed Hank a document. "What's this?" Hank asked. "Notice of unauthorized occupants," the man replied. "The lease on this property lists Diane Sterling and Greg Miller. Any guests staying longer than 48 hours must be registered. You have 3 unregistered adults living here. You are in violation of the occupancy terms." Hank slammed the door shut. "Who does this management company think they are? The Gestapo? It's Diane, Loretta whispered, sitting pale-faced on the sofa. She's behind this. She knows. She doesn't know, Greg insisted, pacing the room like a trapped animal. She's in Japan. She texted me asking about the car keys. She's just organized. She automated everything before she left. We need money, Hank said. Greg, go to the pawn shop. Take those pearl necklaces. Greg looked toward the stairs. I can't get to them. The safe is locked. Smash it open, Hank roared. Use a sledgehammer. Who cares about the wall? This house belongs to us anyway. I watched Greg run down to the basement to grab tools. My heart raced, but not out of fear. If they caused physical damage to the walls, that was property destruction. Just another item to add to the mounting list of charges. Greg came back up holding a crowbar and a heavy sledgehammer. He marched into the study.
Thud, thud. The sound of metal smashing into drywall echoed clearly through the audio feed. He was destroying my home, destroying my father's study.
But that safe was a reinforced titanium model my father had installed specifically to protect his most valuable documents. Greg swung for an hour. He chipped off the paint. He punched a massive hole in the drywall around it. But he couldn't even dent the safe itself. Exhausted, sweating and completely defeated, he hurled the crowbar across the room. It shattered a glass bookcase. Useless, Tiffany shouted from the doorway. You are completely useless.
Shut up, Greg fired back, his face turning purple with rage. I am doing all of this for you. You haven't contributed a single thing.
Tiffany grabbed her purse. I'm going to get some food. I have a little cash of my own left in my bag. Share it with us, Loretta demanded. In your dreams, Tiffany snapped. My baby needs to eat. You old vultures can starve for all I care.
She stormed out, slamming the door.
I couldn't help but smile. The rats were finally turning on each other. The hunger was setting in. On Wednesday, a new player entered the board. My phone rang in the hotel room. I looked at the caller ID. Becky Miller, Greg's cousin. I hesitated. Becky was always considered the black sheep of the Miller family because she was a single mom working 2 waitressing jobs who refused to bow down to Hank. The rest of the family looked down on her, mocked her financial struggles, and excluded her from the high society events they hosted using my money. I answered cautiously, Hello? Diane, it's Becky. Her voice sounded incredibly tense. Hi, Becky. Look, I saw on Facebook that you're in Japan, but I had to call. Is this an international call? I'll make it quick. It's fine, Becky, I reassured her. I'm on Wi-Fi. What's going on? I know we don't talk much, she began, but Greg called me an hour ago. My grip tightened on the phone. Oh? What did he want? He wanted to borrow money, Becky said. He asked me for $500, said there was an emergency and the banking system was down. Did you give it to him? Are you kidding? I don't have $500 to just throw around, Becky said with a bitter laugh. But that's not why I'm calling. Diane, he sounded completely desperate, and in the background I could hear a woman screaming. It wasn't you. I stayed silent, letting her speak. Dan? Becky continued, lowering her voice. Who is Tiffany? I took a deep breath. Becky had always been kind to me, even if she was a bit rough around the edges. Whenever I sent holiday gifts to the Miller family, she was the only one who ever bothers to say thank you. Tiffany is his pregnant mistress, I said flatly. Absolute silence fell over the line. Then a long, low whistle. A piece of trash, Becky whispered. He's cheating on you? After everything you've done for that family? It's worse than cheating, Becky. They're trying to take everything I own. They forged a power of attorney. Right now, they're all living in my house. Greg, Hank, Loretta, and Tiffany. Planning how to spend my money. They even openly discussed what would happen if I died. Oh my God, Becky gasped. Dan, you need to call the police. I'm handling it, I said. But I need to know whose side you're on. Are you kidding? I despise them, Becky said, with a level of anger that caught me by surprise. Do you know that when my mum passed away 5 years ago, Greg borrowed $2,000 from me? He said he needed it for an investment. I found out later he just used it to buy a luxury watch. He never paid me back. He watched me struggle to buy diapers for my son while wearing my inheritance on his wrist. They treat me like garbage. But you, Diane, you actually treat me like a human being. You were the only one who bothered to ask about my son at family gatherings. Becky, I said, a new plan forming in my mind. I need a favour. I need someone to go to the house and confirm exactly who is inside right now. I need an independent witness who isn't on my payroll. Can you go over there?" "Go there and say what?" "Oh, pretend you're bringing them food. Bring over a casserole or something. Tell them you heard Greg was having a rough time and wanted to help out. They are practically starving right now, so they'll let you right in. Just look around. Take note of the damage. Confirm Tiffany is there. And then leave." "I can do that," Becky said. "Honestly, I'd love to see them squirm. If you do this for me," I added, "I will pay off your student loans, every last cent." "Dan, you don't have to do that." "I want to," I said. "Real family looks out for each other, and you're the only decent Miller left." 2 hours later, I watched my camera feed as Becky arrived at the brownstone, carrying a large tray of lasagna. Greg opened the door, looking completely exhausted. "Becky, what are you doing here?" "Heard things were a little rough," Becky said, pushing right past him into the house. "Thought I'd bring over some dinner." The scent of actual food worked like a magnet. Hank and Loretta immediately hurried out of the living room. Tiffany shuffled out from the kitchen. "Who is this?" Tiffany asked, eyeing Becky's worn coat with judgment. "It's just Cousin Becky," Loretta dismissed her, snatching the lasagna away. "She's a waitress." Becky's eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure. She looked directly at Tiffany's pregnant stomach. She noted the shattered walls in the study. She looked at the red wine stains on the floor. "So," Becky said, turning her gaze back to Greg, "is this the new arrangement?" "It's just temporary," Greg muttered, stuffing a piece of lasagna into his mouth. "Diane is transitioning out." "Does she know she's transitioning out?" Becky asked innocently. "She will!" Hank barked, his mouth full of food. "Now get out, Becky. We don't need you hanging around." "Thanks for the food," Tiffany added, without even looking up. "Next time, bring some garlic bread." Becky walked toward the door. Before stepping outside, she looked directly at the potted plant where my hidden camera was placed. She gave a subtle, sharp nod. As soon as she got back to her car, she called me. "They're all in there," she confirmed. "The house is a complete wreck. Greg looks like he hasn't slept in a week. Tiffany is wearing your clothes. And Hank? Hank openly told me that as soon as they get your money, they're buying a boat and leaving the country." "Thank you, Becky," I said. "You just gave me the final piece of the puzzle. Independent third-party verification." "Make them pay, Diane," Becky said. "For all of us." I hung up the phone and looked at the calendar. It was Thursday. I was supposed to remain in Japan until next week. But the Queen was coming home early. Friday morning arrived. The sky was a bright, harsh blue, and the slush on the sidewalks had frozen into grey ice. I stood in the hotel lobby, checking my reflection. I wasn't wearing my usual practical work suit. Instead, I wore a tailored black dress that cost more than Greg's car, a sharp white winter coat, and a pair of towering heels. I looked like a woman who had just buried her past and was ready to collect the payout. In a way, I was. Mr. Reynolds was waiting outside in a black SUV. With him were 2 men who looked capable of handling any physical threat, private security. In the vehicle behind us sat a professional process server and a uniformed police officer, whom Mr. Reynolds had coordinated based on the documented threats of domestic financial abuse and unauthorized occupants. "Are you ready?" Reynolds asked as I slid into the back seat. "I've been ready for 5 years, I replied. "I just didn't realize it until now." The drive to the Upper East Side was completely silent. I watched the city blur past the window, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The version of Diane who sat crying in her car on Christmas Eve felt like a total stranger. Now, I was cold. I was precise. We pulled up to the brownstone at exactly 11 a.m. It was the perfect time. They would be just waking up, hungry, and dealing with the reality of their situation. I noticed one of the curtains twitch upstairs. Someone was watching. "All right," Reynolds said. "We move quickly. Security goes in first to secure the rooms. Then us. Officer O'Malley will remain at the door to ensure no one tries to slip away."
I nodded. I pulled out my keys, the master said. We walked up the stone steps in a tight formation. I could feel the neighbours staring from across the street. Let them watch. They were about to get a front row seat to the fallout.
I unlocked the door. The security team pushed it open, their large frames immediately filling the entryway. "Clear," one of them called out. I stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the odour. Sour alcohol, unwashed laundry, and old takeout. My beautiful lavender-scented home now smelled like a cheap frat house. Who on earth is that? Hank's voice boomed from the living room. Greg, someone's breaking in. Greg came running out of the kitchen, holding half a stale bagel. The moment he saw the wall of muscle standing in his hallway, he froze completely in his tracks. Then his eyes landed on me.
His face cycled through a dozen emotions in a matter of seconds. Confusion, fear, recognition, and absolute terror.
Diane, he stammered, you're supposed to be in Tokyo. Hello, Greg, I said calmly, my voice echoing clearly off the high ceilings. I took an early flight back. The deal fell through, just like your life. Loretta and Hank hurried out behind him. Loretta let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth with her hands. Hank's face immediately turned a deep crimson. Then, drawn out by the noise, Tiffany shuffled out of the living room. She was wearing my white cashmere sweater, now ruined with coffee stains, and had her hand resting over her stomach. When she saw me, she stopped dead in her tracks. She looked at Greg, then at the police officer standing right behind me. Who is this? Tiffany asked, though deep down she already knew. I'm the homeowner, I said, taking a deliberate step forward. And all of you are currently trespassing? The silence that followed was broken only by the sharp click of my heels against the hardwood floor as I walked into the center of the room. I took a slow look around at the destruction. The holes in the wall, the shattered glass, the filth. I looked at the people I had supported for years. Surprise, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Merry Christmas. The shock in the room was almost physical. It seemed to suck the air right out of their lungs. For a long moment, nobody moved. They were a perfect portrait of guilt. Greg shivering in his boxers and a t-shirt. Loretta in a stained bathrobe. Hank looking like a cornered animal. And Tiffany, the pregnant mistress, standing in my clothes inside my house. Greg was the first to completely break down. His survival instincts kicked in, but his brain was clearly short-circuiting. Diane, he stammered, taking a step toward me with his hands raised defensively. This isn't what it looks like. This is Tiffany. She's a cousin, a distant cousin from Ohio. She had nowhere else to go, and she's pregnant, and I know how incredibly compassionate you are, so I just thought, stop, I said. I didn't need to shout. A cousin, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Is that why she's wearing my cashmere sweater? Is that why she was living in my West Side apartment under a forged lease? Is that why you stood there on Christmas Eve and announced to your parents that she was carrying the Miller heir? Greg's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, resembling a fish out of water.
You heard that?
I heard everything, Greg. The Christmas Eve toast, the talk about the inheritance, and your little plan to get me to sign over the power of attorney. Loretta let out a muffled sob. She knows. Oh my God, she knows everything. I know a lot more than that, I said, shifting my gaze directly to Hank. He visibly flinched under my eyes. I know about the accident you all were planning for me. The brakes, the carbon monoxide, and the $5 million life insurance policy. Hank's face drained completely, turning a sickly grey. That was just talk. We were drinking. We didn't mean any of it. The authorities will be the ones deciding what you meant, I replied, gesturing toward Officer O'Malley at the door.
Suddenly, Tiffany stepped forward. She was young, entitled, and clearly didn't comprehend the gravity of the situation she was in. She looked me up and down with a sneer.
Oh, so you're Diane, she said, crossing her arms over my ruined sweater. Greg said you were plain, but he didn't mention you were a... Look, I am carrying his son. This house is going to be ours anyway. Why don't you just sign the papers and walk away? You can't force a man to stay if he doesn't want you. I looked at her. I felt a flicker of pity for the unborn child she was carrying, but absolutely zero sympathy for her. You poor, foolish girl, I said softly. You actually think he wants you. He wants money. My money. But guess what? The money is completely gone. What? Tiffany turned sharply to Greg. Greg is entirely broke, Tiffany, I said, addressing her but keeping my eyes locked onto him. He doesn't have a job. He's been living off my salary and stealing my rental income to fund an online gambling habit. He is drowning in massive debt. And as of 3 days ago, he has been completely cut off from every single one of my accounts. That's a lie, Tiffany screamed at Greg. She started hitting his chest with her fists. Tell her she's lying. You told me you were a day trader. You told me you had millions." Greg buried his face in his hands. I was going to make it back. I have a strategy. He's a gambler," I continued, driving the point home. "This house belongs entirely to me. It's inherited property. He owns absolutely nothing. If I file for divorce today, which I am doing, he leaves with nothing but the clothes on his back. And technically, I paid for those clothes too." Tiffany turned on Greg entirely, her fists raining down on him. "You liar! You complete loser! You promised me everything. I left my family for you. Get away from me." Greg shoved her away roughly.
"That's enough." Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This spectacle is over. Officer, please begin removing these individuals from the premises."
"You can't kick us out," Loretta shrieked, clutching tightly to the sofa. "We've lived here for 12 years. We have squatters' rights." Mr. Reynolds offered a cold smile, pulling a document from his briefcase. "Actually, Mrs. Miller, you were guests, and due to documented credible threats of violence against the property owner, your guest privileges have been legally revoked. We obtained an emergency protection order from a judge first thing this morning. You have exactly 30 minutes to pack your personal items and leave. Anything left behind will be moved to the curb." 30 minutes? Hank yelled. "Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't care," I said flatly. "Go to a hotel. Go to a shelter. Figure it out. Just get out of my house. As for you," I pointed directly at Greg, "you stay right here. We have legal matters to settle." For a split second, a look of hope crossed Greg's face. "Diane, can we please just talk? Can we work this out?" "No," I said coldly. "You're going to sign the divorce settlement right now in front of the officer. And if I refuse..." Greg tried to muster up a final shred of defiance. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording from the day before. Hank's voice filled the room. "We could mess with the brakes. Carbon monoxide."
Then Greg's voice. "5 million. That sets us up for life." I paused the playback.
"If you do not sign this document, waiving every single claim to my assets, giving up all rights to alimony, and accepting full legal responsibility for the $280,000 you stole from my accounts, I will hand this recording directly to the district attorney. You and your parents will be looking at charges for conspiracy, attempted insurance fraud, and grand larceny." I stepped in close, looking him dead in the eye. "Sign the papers, Greg, and you might walk away a free man. Refuse, and you'll be spending the night in a holding cell." Greg looked over at his parents. They were completely terrified, shaking their heads and silently begging him to save them. He looked at Tiffany, who was leaning against the wall, crying, finally realizing her dream of a wealthy life was completely over. Without saying another word, Greg reached out his shaking hand, took the pen from the process server, and signed his name on the dotted line. He looked at me, and he knew he had reached the end of the line. "I'll sign," he whispered. The next 30 minutes were a chaotic cleanup. The security detail stood right over Hank and Loretta, watching as they frantically stuffed clothes into black trash bags. They had zero dignity left. At one point, Loretta tried to slip a pair of silver candlesticks into her bag. "Put it back," the guard barked. "It belongs to me," she lied. "Those have the Sterling family crest engraved right on them," I said, standing in the doorway. "Drop them, Loretta, unless you want me to add grand theft to the charges." She dropped them with a loud clang, glaring at me with pure venom. "You ungrateful animal. We raised you. We loved you." "You loved my bank account," I corrected her. "You hated me. You spit on my mother's portrait. I saw it all on the cameras. Don't talk to me about love." She flinched as if she'd been struck. In that exact moment, she realized there were no more secrets. I had seen everything behind the curtain. Tiffany was the first one to walk out. She dragged her luxury suitcase down the stairs, cursing everyone on her way out. "I hope you all rot," she screamed at Greg. "Never call me again." "Tiffany, wait," Greg called out weakly, but he was trapped at the dining table, his pen hovering over the divorce settlement Reynolds had laid out. "Sign it, Greg," Reynolds said. "Page 4, initial here, sign at the bottom." Greg signed. His hand was shaking so badly his signature was barely legible, but it was legally binding. With every stroke of the pen, he stripped away any claim to my life. He acknowledged the debt. He waived spousal support. He walked away with absolutely nothing but his own gambling debts. "All right," Reynolds said, snatching up the documents. "Now get out." Greg stood up, He looked so incredibly small. He looked like the pathetic, weak man he had always been underneath the power I used to give him. "Diane," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I lost my way. The gambling, the pressure. I just wanted to be enough for you."
"Save it," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't insult my intelligence with a sob story. You didn't want to be enough for me. You wanted to replace me. You wanted me out of the picture so you and her could live off my wealth."
"I never wanted anything bad to happen to you," he protested. "That was my dad's idea." "But you didn't stop him," I replied. "You listened. You calculated. That makes you even worse, Greg. He was a wolf in the open. You were a snake in the grass." Officer O'Malley stepped forward. "Time to go, sir." Greg walked out the front door. Hank and Loretta were already standing on the sidewalk, waiting next to a pile of black garbage bags. The neighbors were watching from behind their windows. It was total public disgrace. Complete humiliation. As Greg stepped past the gate, I called out to him one last time.
"Hey, Greg."
He turned around, a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I changed the locks an hour ago," I said. "Don't bother trying your key." I slammed the heavy oak door right in his face. I heard the deadbolt click into place. I stood alone in the entryway. The house was completely silent. It was dirty, it smelled bad, and there was a hole in the wall. But it was mine. Finally, truly mine. I leaned against the door and slid down to the floor. The adrenaline faded. I didn't cry. Instead, I just started laughing. A low, hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. I did it. I faced the monsters, and I won. Mr. Reynolds walked over and offered me a hand. "Good work, kid. Your father would be proud." "I need a drink," I said, pulling myself up. "But not champagne. They drank it all." "I think," Mr. Reynolds said, looking at his watch, "we can afford a new bottle. And then we need to call a deep cleaning crew. This place needs a fresh start." "Burn the sheets," I said. "Burn the rugs. Burn everything they touched." Getting them out of the house was just the first victory. For the next 2 months, the battle shifted to the courtroom, but it wasn't even a fair fight. With the signed settlement and the recorded audio evidence of financial fraud and conspiracy, Greg didn't stand a chance. He tried to hire a lawyer, but the moment the attorney heard the recordings and saw the paperwork Greg had already signed, they dropped the case immediately. We filed the divorce decree, and it was finalized in record time. Greg was ordered to pay back the $280,000 he embezzled. Since he had no money, the court ordered a wage garnishment. "But he doesn't have a job," I told Reynolds. "He will," Reynolds replied. "The court ordered him to seek employment immediately or face jail time for contempt. His days of pretending to be a day trader are officially over." We also sued Hank and Loretta for property damage, the holes in the walls, the ruined furniture, and the items they had stolen over the years. We filed for $50,000. They tried to countersue, claiming I had promised them a lifetime tenancy. It was a joke. Reynolds completely shut them down in court with a single document. A simple lease agreement they had signed a decade ago that I had completely forgotten about, which clearly listed them as at-will tenants. They lost. They were ordered to pay. They had to sell their car, the classic Cadillac Hank treated like gold, just to pay off the judgment. I didn't stop there. I contacted the IRS. "I believe there are major discrepancies in my ex-husband's tax returns," I told the agent. He claimed to be a professional trader facing massive losses, but he was operating with stolen funds. An audit was launched into Greg and his parents. It turned out Hank hadn't paid taxes on his under-the-table consulting income or side construction jobs for years. The system came down on them like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just my reckoning anymore. It was the consequences of a lifetime of cutting corners catching up to them all at once. Meanwhile, I started taking back control of my life. I hired contractors to restore the brownstone. I threw away every single piece of furniture Greg or his parents had ever sat on. I repainted the walls. I replaced the carpets. I wanted every trace of their presence completely erased from my sanctuary. One afternoon, while overseeing the painters, I got a call from Becky. "You won't believe it," she said, sounding thrilled. "Tiffany moved back in with her parents in Ohio. But get this, she's suing Greg for child support." "Yeah, good luck getting blood from a stone," I said. "And what about Greg?" Becky laughed. "He's working at a car wash in Queens. I saw him. He was scrubbing tires. He looks 10 years older. And Hank and Loretta? They're living in a tiny one-bedroom basement apartment in the Bronx. Loretta is a greeter at Walmart, and Hank tried to apply for disability, but got rejected. That's justice, I said. It's poetic, Becky agreed. By the way, I got a letter from my bank. My student loans are completely paid off. Diane, I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything, I told her. Just live a good life. Break the cycle. I will, she promised. Winter faded into spring. The snow melted, washing away the dirt and grime from the sidewalks. I sold the apartment buildings. All of them. Even the ones Greg hadn't managed to touch. I didn't want to be a landlord anymore. I didn't want the stress. I put the money into a managed index fund so I wouldn't have to look at it every day. I kept the brownstone for a little while, thinking I could make it feel like home again. But the ghosts of the past were just too loud. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I pictured Loretta sneering at me. Every time I went into the study, I saw Greg trying to smash open the safe. I realized I couldn't heal in the same place where I was hurt. So I put the brownstone on the market. It sold in less than a week to a young couple with a new baby. They walked through the rooms talking about how much love they felt in the house. I just smiled. They brought their own love with them. A house is just a shell. The energy inside is whatever you create. On my very last day in New York, I drove out to that car wash in Queens. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed to see it with my own eyes to fully believe the chapter was closed. I parked my new car across the street, and there he was. Greg. He was wearing a blue jumpsuit that was a couple of sizes too big, bent over, scrubbing the rims of a large SUV. He looked incredibly thin. His hair was thinning out. He looked like a man completely broken by life. His manager shouted something at him, and Greg flinched, nodding repeatedly as he scrubbed even harder. The arrogance was entirely gone. The day trader swagger was completely wiped away. He was just a guy struggling to pay rent. I felt a strange sensation looking at him. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hatred. It was just complete indifference. He was a stranger who had occupied my life for far too long. I rolled up the window and drove away. I didn't honk. I didn't wave. I just left him in my rearview mirror, watching him get smaller and smaller until he disappeared. Before leaving the city for good, I made one stop at the cemetery to visit my parents' graves. "Handled it, Dad," I whispered, touching the cool stone. "I protected the family legacy. I cleaned up the mess." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a brief second I felt a sense of warmth wash over me. "I'm leaving now," I told them. "I'm going to build my own life. Not the one you built, and not the one Greg tried to steal. My own." I thought that was the absolute end of it, but narcissists never let go easily. Just a week before I was set to move to Denver, my phone rang. Unknown number. I usually don't answer, but I was expecting a call from the movers. "Hello? Diane?" The voice was raspy and desperate. It was Greg. "How did you get this number?" I asked, my thumb hovering right over the hang-up button. I had changed my number weeks ago. I called Becky. She wouldn't give it to me, but I went to visit her and slipped it from her phone when she wasn't looking. "You're still stealing from your own cousin. You haven't changed at all, Greg." "Dana, please, don't hang up. I heard you sold the house. I heard you're leaving."
And that is absolutely none of your business.
"I miss you," he sobbed. It sounded incredibly pathetic. "I made a mistake. Massive mistake. Tiffany, she was nothing. She lied to me. She set me up." "She didn't set you up, Greg. You invited her in. You sat there with her and planned my demise. I was weak. My dad, he put so much pressure on me. You know how he is. You're a grown man, Greg. Stop blaming your father for your choices." "Dan, listen to me. I'm struggling so much. I'm living in a tiny, run-down place. I'm washing cars. Is this what you wanted? To see me ruined?" "Yes," I said honestly. "That is exactly what I wanted." "How can you be so cold?" he cried. "We were married. We were family." "We were never family," I said. "I was your host and you were a parasite. Now the host took care of the problem." "I have absolutely nothing," he screamed. Can't you just wire me some money? Just a little bit to get back on my feet? 5,000? That is literally pocket change to you now." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "Greg," I said, "you owe me $280,000. Every single paycheck you earn for the rest of your life is being garnished to pay me back. You're essentially working for me now, so get back to scrubbing those tires. I'll be waiting for my check." "You cold-hearted," he began to scream. I hung up the phone and blocked the number. That conversation didn't upset me at all. If anything, it just proved I was entirely right. It proved he had learned absolutely nothing. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was only sorry he got caught. He was only sorry he was broke. That was the final closure I didn't even know I needed. It cut away any lingering trace of guilt. He was beyond saving, and he was no longer my problem. Moving to Denver was an incredible fresh start. The air was crisp, the people were kind, and the mountains were a constant reminder of how small our problems really are in the grand scheme of things.
I bought a small house, not a brownstone, not a mansion, just a beautiful bungalow with a wraparound porch and a large yard. I started gardening. I, the city girl who used to think nature was just something to look at through a window, bought a pair of gloves, a shovel, and some rose bushes.
Digging in the dirt has a strange way of healing you. You pull out the weeds, prepare the soil, plant something fragile, and care for it. If you do it right, it blooms. I spend my days doing consulting work remotely for a few select clients, completely on my own terms and schedule. In the afternoons, I go for hikes. In the evenings, I read books I actually enjoy, not the ones Greg thought made us look sophisticated. I made friends, real friends. Not people who care about my bank account, but people who enjoy my dry sense of humor and the lasagna I finally learned how to make. I met a woman named Sarah in a pottery class. She was a divorcee too. We bonded over glasses of wine, trading stories about our pasts. When I told her my story, she didn't look at my jewelry or ask about my finances. She just looked at me with respect. "You're a survivor," she said. "You're a warrior." "I'm just Diane," I replied. And for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough. I didn't date. Not for a very long time. I wasn't ready to trust anyone yet, and that was perfectly fine. I learned how to take myself out on dates. I took myself to nice dinners. I bought myself flowers. I learned that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. Being alone in peace is infinitely better than being with someone in a battlefield. One day, about 6 months after I arrived, I got a letter from Mr. Reynolds. "Diane, just wanted to give you a quick update. Hank passed away last week. Heart attack. Loretta is moving into a state-run facility. Greg is still at the car wash, but his payments to you are falling behind. We are filing a motion to seize his tax returns. Hope life in the mountains is treating you well. Best, Reynolds." I set the letter down. Hank was gone. The architect of my pain was no longer around. I didn't feel joy, and I didn't feel sadness. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the universe has a way of balancing the scales on its own. I took the letter outside to my fire pit. I struck a match and watched it catch. The smoke drifted up into the clear Colorado sky, disappearing in an instant. So, here I am, 3 years later. I'm sitting on my porch, drinking coffee from a mug that says, "Boss Lady." A gag gift from Becky, who now comes out to visit me with her son every single year. My roses are in full bloom. The red ones are my favourite. They remind me of my mother's lipstick. I think about my parents often. For a long time, I thought the legacy they left me was just money. The burden of that wealth had made me a target, and I resented it. I used to wish I was broke, just so I could be sure people loved me for who I was. But I realized something important. The money didn't save me. I saved myself. My parents left me something far more valuable than an investment portfolio. They gave me my father's analytical mind. They gave me my mother's grace under pressure. They gave me an example of a relationship built on mutual respect, which ultimately helped me recognize that my marriage to Greg was nothing but a sham. The money was just a tool. The real weapon was my own resilience. I know there are women listening to this story right now who are exactly where I used to be. Maybe you're sitting in a house that feels freezing cold despite the heat being on. Maybe you're looking at a partner who smiles with their teeth but never with their eyes. Maybe you feel like an imposter in your own life, walking on eggshells around the very people who are supposed to support you.
Listen to me. Trust your gut. That sinking feeling in your stomach, that isn't just nerves. That is your intuition screaming at you to pay attention. Do not ignore the red flags just because you're afraid of being alone. Do not sign documents just to keep the peace. Peace built on a lie is not peace at all. It's just a temporary truce that can shatter at any moment.
I lost my family. I lost the future I thought I was building. I lost the naive girl who believed love could fix everything. But look at what I gained. I gained my freedom. I gained my dignity. I gained a life where I don't have to count the silverware after my guests leave. Most importantly, I learned that I am unbreakable. They tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to put all of this into words, but it feels incredible to finally share it. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to stand up and fight for what belongs to you, please give this video a like. Share it with a friend who might need a wake-up call. And if you want to hear more stories about truth and justice, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And as for Greg, if you happen to be listening to this video on your break at the car wash, get back to work. You still owe me $200,000. This is Diane, signing off. Take care of yourselves, ladies. And remember, always check the bank accounts. Diane's journey is more than just a story about justice. It's a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. Watching her transform from a victim of deception into the architect of her own freedom teaches us a vital lesson. True worth is never defined by how others treat us. It's defined by the boundaries we refuse to let them cross. Resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It's about having the courage to walk away, even when toxicity wears the mask of family. We often fear the unknown of starting over, but as we've seen, being alone is infinitely better than being trapped in a room full of lies. Protecting your inner peace is the ultimate form of self-love, and rebuilding your life is the ultimate victory. If this story inspired you to recognize your own value and reminded you that it's never too late to choose yourself, please share your thoughts or simply reply with "good" in the comments below. Let's continue to support one another in living with dignity and strength.